Hello and welcome to You with Jesus. Let's start by getting straight into today's passage. Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field. But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away. When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, "Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field? Where then did the weeds come from?" "An enemy did this," he replied. The servants asked him, "Do you want us to go and pull them up?" "No," he answered, "because while you are pulling the weeds, you may uproot the wheat with them. Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn." This parable follows the parable of the sower, and the imagery is similar. They both involve a farmer, they both involve seed, they both involve productivity. In the parable of the sower, we have four responses to the seed. The first is a non-response. There's no belief, no interest, and the word is snatched away as soon as it's heard. The second response is enthusiasm, but it's only skin deep and doesn't last. The third response is those battling on, but they're too consumed with the worries of this life for the word to be effective. The fourth response is those receiving the word into good soil and producing a lasting fruit as a result. Now it seems we have a fifth group. This comes about not through the good seed that was sown, but by enemy seed that was sown during the night. And the enemy seeds produce only weeds, and these weeds are growing up alongside the wheat. The farm labourers come to the farmer and say, "You've got weeds growing up alongside the wheat. Do you want us to pull them out?" Fair question, you might say. But the farmer, who is a Jesus figure in the parable, says, "No, leave them in for now, because as you pull up the weeds, you might pull up some of the good stuff. So wait until the harvest, and then they will be separated. The weeds will be burnt, the wheat will go into the barn." Now, why might they pull up good stuff alongside the weeds if they try it themselves? Is it that they're clumsy? It's probably more to do with the fact that the weeds can look very similar to the good stuff, and it's easy to make a mistake and pull out the wrong thing. I remember when I was at high school and I was wanting to earn some extra pocket money, so I offered myself out for gardening services. And some of my parents' friends were very kind and let me loose on their lawns. I really didn't know what I was doing. I could push a lawnmower around, but that was the extent of my landscaping skills. One place I went to, it was a beautiful waterfront property on the edge of the Port Hacking River in Sydney, and it had this sloping garden divided by sandstone. And so with few instructions and no experience at all, I was told that my job that day was to de-weed this huge area of sloping gardens. They went out for the day and all I saw was dollar signs, and I threw myself into the project very enthusiastically, looking to impress my client with my hard work and determination. And when they returned home, I was beaming with pride over my efficiency, only to see them standing in horror that I'd stripped the garden of some of their precious natives. How was I to know? Looked like weeds to me. Anyway, I got paid, so I was happy. The moral of the story: weeding should be left to those who really know what they're doing. We're told that at the end of the age there will be an ingathering of all those who believe, and these will go into the Father's eternal kingdom. The angels will be sent from heaven as harvesters to gather in this group. But the allusion here is that they will first gather in those who've been planted by the enemy. These will be set aside for the fate prepared for them. Then the good harvest will be brought in. In the meantime, both wheat and weeds grow up together. And a lot of the time, we don't actually know who's who. We think we know, but we can't know for sure. The suggestion here is that those we think are on the outside of God's kingdom might in fact be on the inside. And some of those we think are surely on the outside are actually on the inside. Bible commentator Leon Morris says this: "The weeds are probably darnel, a poisonous plant related to wheat and virtually indistinguishable from it until the ears form. To sow darnel among wheat as an act of revenge was punishable in Roman law, which suggests that the parable depicts a real-life situation. A light infestation of darnel could be tackled by careful weeding, but mistakes could easily be made. In the case of a heavy infestation, the stronger roots of the darnel would be tangled with those of the wheat, making selective weeding impossible. Most of us prefer things in tidy boxes, but when it comes to judging who is really a Christian, then it gets problematic. If I'm understanding the parable correctly, there are some in churches today who appear to make all the right noises. They sing the songs, pray the prayers, bake the cakes, all that, but they're not part of God's kingdom. Then on the other side of the equation, there's people who may not even go to church, whom we might deem to be lost souls, who may not be able to articulate what it is they believe. Their behaviour, their code of dress, maybe their language, suggest to us that they wouldn't be in God's family. Suffice to say, we are in for a few surprises. And it's probably just as well that God hasn't tasked us with separating the wheat and the weeds now, because we would be making a lot of mistakes. The garden might end up looking very much like my destructive efforts all those years ago. So we're told here we need to wait. And on this matter of who is in and who is out, we should be very careful. Now, elsewhere, we have been told by Jesus that there are false and true prophets and that we should be on our guard. We're also told that by their fruit you will know them. So how do we reconcile these two passages that appear to be in conflict? One saying, don't weed out who you think isn't part of the in-group, and the other passage encouraging us to be discerning about people masquerading as genuine. I think there are two principles at work here. One test is for those who exercise leadership and authority in the church. Jesus is saying there's charlatans out there who care nothing for the sheep. They're interested only in how they can leverage their position for their own personal gain. And you can spot them. They are recognizable by their fruit or lack of it. So on that point, we are to be discerning, otherwise we'll be sucked into their deception. The second principle, which is the subject of our parable in this episode, relates to the general populace, not those in positions of spiritual leadership. And the simple fact is, it's impossible to accurately know who has genuine faith and who doesn't. And for that reason, don't go weeding people out. Wait until the end of the age and let Jesus and his angels make the separation of who is in and who is out. As you may know, I spent a year visiting different churches, and I visited over 40 different churches of all denominations over the course of a year, and it was very interesting to observe that churches would have what I would call an open membership policy or a closed membership policy. Many churches go to a lot of effort to define who is part of the in-group. You might have to sign on to a creedal statement or be baptized according to the rites of that church, or join one of the service teams, or become one of the top financial contributors. We all set up rules for what being in looks like. Meanwhile, if you don't conform to certain criteria, you are perceived as being on the outside. There was one church I tried to visit, and I thought I'd give them a heads up that I was coming, because I knew they had strict criteria even to join them for a Sunday service. So I rang a number, left a message. They didn't return my call. I emailed them several times. No response. I tried different numbers. Nothing. I was definitely on the outer, and there was seemingly no way to get in. Other churches are very open in terms of turning up. They love new people to attend, but to be part of the in group, there are very strict criteria that must be satisfied. Sometimes these criteria are unspoken. I find the issue of formal church membership an interesting one, because you can tick all the boxes, but at the end of the day, not be part of God's eternal kingdom. Conversely, you can be a failing Christian or not even a churchgoer, but God knows better than me what's going on in your heart. Wheat and weeds, they even sound the same. Let's just love everybody, regard everybody as worthy of our love and respect, and let God do the judging. See you in the next episode.